In the year 784, Emperor Kammu made the monumental decision to move the imperial capital of Japan away from the ancient city of Nara. He aimed to escape the stifling political influence of the powerful Buddhist monasteries that had come to dominate the court. This initial relocation to Nagyakakayo marked the beginning of a transitional phase for the country. However, the new capital of Nagyakakayo was abandoned after only 10 years of construction due to recurrent floods and political disasters. The mysterious death of Prince Sawara, who was exiled and starved, led the court to believe the site was cursed by his vengeful spirit. These events forced the emperor to search for another location. In the year 794, Emperor Kammu successfully relocated the imperial capital of Japan to Heian-kyo, which is known in modern times as Kyoto. This historic move marked the formal beginning of the Heian period, an era defined by a unique aristocratic culture that would flourish in isolation for over 4 centuries. The layout of the new capital of Heian-kyo was carefully modeled after the Chinese Tang dynasty capital of Chang'an. It featured a symmetrical grid system divided by a massive central road known as Suzaku Avenue, which ran straight from the southern Rajaman Gate all the way to the Grand Palace complex. Suzaku Avenue was 84 meters wide, providing a grand gravel pathway through the capital and separating the city into eastern and western halves. At the northern end of this avenue stood the Daidari, the great palace enclosure, which housed the emperor's private residence and the main offices of the imperial administration. Within the massive Daidari palace enclosure, the emperor resided in the inner palace, called the Dari, which was completely surrounded by administrative ministries. It was here that the court established the Ritsuryo legal system, a complex set of penal and administrative codes adapted from Chinese models that governed every aspect of daily aristocratic life. Under this legal framework, Heian society was stratified into a court rank system consisting of 30 distinct grades that determined all political power. Only the highest 3 ranks, known as the Kujio, were allowed to attend imperial councils, make major policy decisions, and receive the most lucrative and influential administrative posts in the country. These Kujio nobles built expansive and beautiful residential estates in the Shindan-zukuri architectural style, which became the standard layout for the Heian elite. These grand properties featured symmetrical wooden pavilions connected by covered corridors, surrounding a large gravel courtyard with a central artificial pond designed specifically for leisurely boating and elegant poetry excursions. To finance their highly luxurious lifestyles, Heian aristocrats relied on private tax-exempt estates called shun, which completely bypassed the centralized imperial tax system. These shun properties grew rapidly across the provinces, transferring vast amounts of agricultural wealth directly to court nobles and temples, thereby depriving the imperial treasury of vital resources. The rapid accumulation of land wealth allowed the powerful Fujiwara clan to rise to prominence, establishing a strategy of placing their daughters close to the throne. By marrying their daughters to young emperors, Fujiwara leaders secured their positions as maternal grandfathers to the future rulers, gaining total and absolute control over all imperial succession. The chief architect of this marriage alliance strategy was Fujiwara no Fuhito, a powerful statesman who died in the year 720. Fuhito drafted the historic Teiho Code and successfully married his daughter Miyako to Emperor Monmu, creating the model for the clan's future political domination of the imperial court for many subsequent generations. Fuhito also successfully placed his other daughter, Kamiyoshi, as the consort of Emperor Shamu, establishing the precedent of non-imperial empresses. This strategic move ensured that the Fujiwara bloodline was permanently woven into the imperial family, allowing them to claim a unique authority that no other noble clan in Japan could ever hope to challenge. In the year 810, Emperor Saga established the Kurodo Dokoro, which was also known as the Bureau of Archives, to manage private imperial documents and secure important state secrets. This new administrative body allowed the sovereign to completely bypass the traditional ministries and communicate directly with his trusted advisors, effectively centralizing political power back to the throne during a time of intense political rivalry. The historic Kusuko incident of 810 occurred when the retired Emperor Heize attempted to move the imperial capital back to Nara against the wishes of the reigning Emperor Saga. In response to this threat, Emperor Saga quickly suppressed the rebellion with the help of Sakano no Tamuramaro, the country's most celebrated military general, thereby solidifying Heian-kyo as the permanent and undisputed seat of imperial power. In the year 858, Fujiwara no Yashifusa took the clan's political control to a new level by appointing himself sessho, or regent, for his young grandson Emperor Seiwa. This significant event marked the first time a regent who was not of imperial blood ruled the country on behalf of the sovereign, setting a revolutionary political precedent. Following the death of Yashifusa, his adopted son Fujiwara no Madetsune established the powerful new office of Kanpaku in the year 887 to maintain clan control even over adult emperors. Together, these two key regency positions of sessho and Kanpaku formed the absolute foundation of second politics, an elite system that dominated the Heian administration and controlled the throne for over 2 centuries. Under the framework of second politics, when an emperor grew old enough to assert his personal independence, the powerful Fujiwara regent would immediately pressure him to abdicate the imperial throne. This political maneuver allowed the regents to quickly replace the retired sovereign with a much younger, more malleable child emperor, who would remain securely under the strict guidance and control of his maternal Fujiwara grandfather. A clear example of this manipulation occurred in the year 969, when Emperor Reizei was pressured to abdicate after ruling for only 2 years due to alleged mental instability. The Fujiwara regents quickly replaced him with his younger brother, Emperor Enyu, securing their absolute grip on the imperial court during this period of political turmoil. Rival noble clans that attempted to challenge the growing Fujiwara monopoly on power were swiftly eliminated through calculated political intrigue, fabricated accusations of disloyalty, and sudden exile from the capital. During the infamous Ana incident of 969, the prominent statesman Minamoto no Takakura was falsely accused of treason and summarily exiled to the remote Dasefu military outpost on Kyushu Island, ending his influence. Perhaps the most famous victim of these ruthless political purges was Sugawara no Michizane, an exceptionally brilliant scholar and trusted advisor to Emperor Yuta. Although Michizane had risen to high office specifically to help balance the overwhelming Fujiwara influence, in the year 901, the rival statesman Fujiwara no Takahira falsely accused him of plotting to depose the young reigning emperor. As a direct result of this malicious conspiracy, the disgraced Sugawara no Michizane was exiled to Dasefu, where he tragically died in poverty 2 years later in the year 903. Shortly following his death, Heian-kyo was struck by a terrifying series of severe plagues and devastating lightning storms that repeatedly struck and destroyed key parts of the imperial palace complex. Convinced that these supernatural disasters were caused by Michizane's vengeful spirit, the terrified court built the Grand Katano Tenmangu shrine in Heian-kyo to appease his angry soul. The deceased scholar was later deified as Tenjin, the revered patron deity of literature and learning, showing how deep spiritual belief acted as a powerful tool to resolve political guilt and restore peace. With all their rivals and competitors successfully neutralized, the Fujiwara clan reached the absolute peak of their political power under the leadership of Fujiwara no Michinaga in the early 11th century. Michinaga firmly held the imperial court in his grip for 30 years, using strategic marriages to serve as the maternal grandfather to 3 emperors and the father-in-law to 4. Michinaga's absolute confidence in his supreme political dominance is captured in his famous waka poem recorded in the Shiyuki, which was the private diary of the court noble Fujiwara no Seinsuke. In this famous verse, Michinaga boldly boasted that the entire world was essentially his own, and that his personal power was as complete and flawless as the shining full moon in the night sky. To consolidate his family's influence over the imperial palace, Michinaga married his daughter Fujiwara no Shoshi to Emperor Akijo in the year 999. This strategic marriage alliance created an intense cultural and political rivalry, as Emperor Akijo already had an active empress consort, Fujiwara no Teishi, who was supported by a highly ambitious and rival branch of the Fujiwara family. This cultural rivalry between Empress Teishi and Empress Shoshi split the imperial salon into 2 competitive camps, with each empress sponsoring her own court of exceptionally brilliant literary wit. Empress Teishi patronized the witty Eskis Sei Shonagon, while Empress Shoshi gathered a rival literary circle that included the famous novelist Murasaki Shikabu, setting the stage for a golden age of literature. Murasaki Shikibu composed her timeless masterpiece, The Tale of Genji, which provides a highly detailed and nuanced look at the complex romantic and political intrigues of the fictional Prince Hikaru Genji. This massive 54-chapter novel served as a primary record of Heian court customs, elaborate dress styles, unique architecture, and the sensitive emotional lives of the country's ruling elite class. Meanwhile, Sei Shonagon compiled her famous Pillow Book, which was a collection of personal essays, descriptive lists, and sharp observations written during her years of service to Empress Teishi. Her satirical observations revealed a highly judgmental and aesthetic court culture, where an incorrect color combination of clothing or a piece of poor handwriting could easily ruin a noble's social reputation. The prominent poet Kai no Tsuruyuki compiled the Tosa Nikki in the year 935, which was a famous travel diary written entirely in the native Japanese kana syllabary script. Tsuruyuki intentionally wrote from the perspective of a woman, using the simplified phonetic script to freely express deep personal emotions and experiences that were generally considered inappropriate for formal Chinese prose. The development of the phonetic kana script allowed Heian noble women to write expressive poetry and long novels, bypassing the rigid classical Chinese script that was strictly reserved for official male business. This linguistic freedom led directly to a spectacular golden age of literature written by women, which uniquely documented the private thoughts, romantic lives, and internal intrigues of the imperial court. The core aesthetic values of this elite aristocratic class were captured by the term miyabi, which translates directly to courtly elegance or aesthetic refinement. This concept of miyabi demanded the complete elimination of anything rustic, ugly, or remotely associated with manual labor, forcing the Heian aristocracy to live their lives inside a highly stylized, refined, and artificial social world. To display this extreme aesthetic refinement, court ladies wore the junhato, an incredibly elaborate 12-layered silk costume that could easily weigh up to 20 kilograms. The complex color combinations of these silk layers, known as kasi no irome, were carefully chosen by the wearer to match the exact seasonal flowers, plants, and natural shades of each specific month. Meanwhile, male aristocrats wore the sokyutai, which was a structured formal robe paired with wide trousers and a tall black lacquered hat called a kanmuri. They also carried a flat wooden baton called a shaku, which served not only as a symbol of authority but also as a practical memo pad for recording complex imperial instructions during ceremonies. The unique Heian ideal of physical beauty also involved the practice of ohaguro, where both noble men and women blackened their teeth using a mixture of iron filings and tea. These pitch-black teeth were considered highly beautiful because they contrasted sharply with the thick, pale white face powder that was continuously applied to their skin. In addition to ohaguro, court women practiced hikameyu, a fashion where they shaved off their natural eyebrows and painted dark, soft smudge marks high on their foreheads. This distinctive styling, combined with white face powder made of ground rice, created an expressionless mask-like appearance that was highly prized and celebrated by the Heian court elite as a sign of high status. Long, flowing hair was another critical standard of female beauty during this era, with court women keeping their straight black hair, known as kurakami, as long as physically possible. The ideal hair length was actually longer than the woman's own height, requiring multiple personal servants to wash, dry, and carefully comb it with special perfumed oils. Inside the dimly lit rooms of their Shindanzukuri mansions, Heian nobles frequently engaged in takemono race, which was a competitive game of incense blending. During these contests, participants mixed exotic imported materials like agarwood, musk, and cloves to create unique fragrances, which were then judged on their subtle ability to evoke classical Chinese and Japanese poetic themes. Physical outdoor games were also highly popular among the court elite, particularly kemari, a non-competitive sport where aristocrats stood in a circle and kept a deerskin ball aloft. The players kicked the ball using only their right feet, shouting out poetic phrases as they cooperatively attempted to maintain the volley without ever letting the ball touch the ground. In this elite society, poetry was the primary language of romantic courtship, and couples exchanged elegant waka verses written on dyed paper that was folded in complex geometric shapes. These delicate poems were then often attached to seasonal twigs of pine, maple, or cherry blossoms, which carefully matched the emotional tone and current season of the message. Living in this highly secluded society, noble women spent most of their time behind hanging reed screens called suda and wooden folding screens called byabu. A suitor rarely saw a woman's face during the courtship process, instead communicating through these physical barriers and judging her personal refinement solely by the sound of her voice, her calligraphy, and her poetry. When a romantic relationship was officially recognized by the court, the couple celebrated with the traditional Tokoro Arawashi ceremony on the third consecutive night of the groom's visits. During this symbolic ritual, the groom ate special rice cakes prepared by the bride's family, marking his formal and public acceptance into the household as a new son-in-law. To travel through the unpaved streets of Heian-kyo, high-ranking nobles rode inside heavy, slow-moving ox-drawn carriages known as jisha. These carriage vehicles were elaborate wooden structures decorated with lacquered screens and colorful silk tassels, and their exact physical dimensions and outer decorations were strictly regulated by the imperial court according to the passenger's official rank. During major annual state events like the Kamo Festival, which was also widely known as the Ai Matsuri, hundreds of these decorative jisha carriages lined the capital streets. This grand festival, dedicated to the sacred Kamo shrines, was the most important event on the Heian court calendar, beautifully blending public religious devotion with elaborate aristocratic fashion displays. Sumptuous court banquets featured elaborate meals served on low wooden tables called takatsuki, consisting of raw fish, wild fowl, and sweet fermented sake. However, these status-heavy meals lacked essential vitamins, and Heian nobles frequently suffered from kak, which was the local term for beriberi, a severe condition caused by their exclusive and elite polished white rice diet. Due to poor overall nutrition, a general lack of sanitation, and severe dental decay from consuming sweet foods, the average lifespan of Heian nobles was surprisingly short. Most aristocrats died between the ages of 30 and 40, meaning that many powerful leaders were forced to retire or died at the very height of their political careers. The daily spiritual life of the court was heavily governed by the Onmyoryo, the official bureau of yin-yang that monitored cosmological signs. This government department employed yin-yang diviners, known as onmyoji, who were tasked to interpret unusual astronomical events, read complex calendars, and predict the movements of malicious spirits to protect the imperial palace complex. The most famous onmyoji master in Heian history was Abe no Seimei, who successfully served 6 different emperors during the 10th century. Seimei was consulted by the aristocracy on everything from the physical placement of palace gates to the timing of imperial journeys, making him a highly powerful figure behind major political decisions. Under the constant guidance of the onmyoji, Heian nobles practiced katatagi, which required changing their daily travel directions to avoid unlucky paths. If a destination lay in a direction blocked by a moving deity, a noble would travel to a temporary lodging first to successfully bypass the spiritual obstacle and avoid all potential misfortune. The elite Heian court also sponsored massive Buddhist copying projects, believing that transcribing the sacred Lotus Sutra would secure both political power in this world and spiritual salvation in the next. Wealthy nobles commissioned these sutras on expensive indigo-dyed paper, using liquid gold and silver ink, turning these sacred religious texts into visual symbols of their extreme material wealth and social prestige. This religious patronage culminated in the construction of the Grand Hijoji, a massive temple complex built by Fujiwara no Michinaga in the year 1020. This grand complex featured a giant main hall with a 9-meter gilded statue of Amida Buddha, built specifically to guarantee Michinaga's smooth transition to the heavenly Pure Land. While the capital of Heian-kyo was filled with lavish temples and poetry, the provinces outside the capital suffered from severe administrative neglect and heavy taxes. The central court focused entirely on its own aesthetics, completely ignoring the crumbling roads, broken irrigation canals, and rising peasant starvation across the neglected rural areas of Japan. To collect heavy agricultural taxes from these desperate rural populations, the imperial court sent appointed local governors, known as zuryo, to the provinces. These zuryo governors often accumulated massive personal fortunes by ruthlessly squeezing the local peasants, eventually returning to Heian-kyo with enough wealth to buy high court ranks and offices for their own sons. As a direct result of this harsh local exploitation, provincial landowners began organizing private armed bands to protect their estates and families from bandits and corrupt officials. These local security forces eventually evolved into the early samurai, forming localized warrior clans known as Bushidan that operated entirely outside the imperial courts, direct military command and control. In the year 939, this growing provincial unrest violently exploded when the powerful warlord Tera no Masakado launched a massive rebellion against court authorities in the Kanto region. Masakado captured several provincial government offices and boldly declared himself the new emperor, directly challenging the absolute and divine authority of the reigning Emperor Suzaku back in the capital of Kyoto. At the very same time, the noble Fujiwara no Sumitomo led a coordinated pirate rebellion in the Seto Inland Sea, disrupting vital imperial grain shipping to the capital. Sumitomo commanded a massive fleet of over 1,000 vessels, attacking government storehouses and demonstrating the court's total lack of a standing national military army. Unable to suppress these dangerous threats with its own forces, the imperial court was forced to hire provincial warrior clans, particularly the rising Minamoto family. This heavy reliance on the Minamoto and Tera to crush Masakado and Sumitomo revealed the court's absolute dependence on the emerging military class for its continued survival. While the provincial warrior clans grew steadily in power, the capital of Heian-kyo suffered from rising crime, devastating fires, and frequent outbreaks of infectious disease. Impoverished commoners faced terrible starvation, and the bodies of those who died were frequently left abandoned near the ruined, massive southern gateway of Rajaman without any proper burial or religious rites. Organized gang activities and widespread lawlessness also plagued the capital city of Kyoto, including a notorious bandit group led by the rogue noble Hakamadare Yasusuke. This leader Yasusuke and his desperate followers routinely raided wealthy aristocratic Shindanzukuri estates and even successfully entered the imperial palace grounds, showing the total vulnerability of the court's domestic security forces. Fire was another constant danger to the wooden capital of Kyoto, and in the year 960, the Deidari Palace burned down for the first time. This catastrophic fire destroyed the original Dari imperial residence along with centuries of government records, forcing the court to rebuild using funds extracted directly from the impoverished provinces. The historical Nihon Kuryaku Chronicle records that every major fire or destructive earthquake in Heian-kyo was met with frantic state-sponsored purification rituals. The court firmly believed these disasters were direct expressions of the wrath of vengeful spirits, preferring to perform grand Buddhist rites and Shinto prayers rather than improving the capital's basic city infrastructure and safety. Political scandals and conspiracies also continued to erupt inside the imperial court, such as the forced deposition of the young Emperor Kazan in the year 986. The ambitious statesman Fujiwara no Kane actively plotted to replace Kazan with his own young grandson, scheming to force the reigning ruler into a sudden abdication through extreme political deceit and trickery. Kane's son successfully tricked Kazan into leaving the palace at night and entering the Kazanjai temple to take Buddhist vows. Once Kazan had shaved his head to become a cloistered monk, he could no longer rule as the sovereign, allowing the scheming Kane to quickly install his young grandson as the new reigning Emperor Akijo. The Fujiwara regents also frequently clashed with powerful Buddhist temples in the capital area, especially the massive Enryakujai temple complex located on Mount He. This monastery housed thousands of armed warrior monks, known as Sohei, who regularly marched into the streets of Kyoto to demand economic privileges and political concessions from the imperial court using force. These angry Sohei monks carried sacred wooden palanquins containing Shinto deities, called mikoshi, to act as spiritual shields against the arrows of the court guards. The Heian courtiers deeply feared the spiritual curse of attacking these sacred objects, allowing the temple monks to successfully intimidate and influence the fragile imperial government in Kyoto for decades. This complete lack of central administrative control led the powerful Emperor Shirakawa to famously remark that 3 specific things in Japan refused to obey his sovereign will. These uncontrollable forces, according to the emperor, were the rolling dice of active gamblers, the flooding waters of the Kamo River, and the violent, armed warrior monks of Mount Hiei. To finally break the political power of the Fujiwara regents, Emperor Shirakawa initiated a new and highly effective political system in the year 1086. Shirakawa abdicated the throne to his son but continued to govern directly from his retirement, establishing the Insei system, which is also widely known as the cloistered rule system. Under this Insei system, retired emperors set up their own private administrative offices, called the Innocho, to issue direct decrees that effectively bypassed the Fujiwara regents. This arrangement allowed the cloistered rulers to collect land revenues directly from supportive Shun estates, creating a dual government structure that deeply split the political loyalties of the Kyoto imperial court. The emergence of the Insei system divided the court into two distinct factions, those loyal to the reigning emperor and those supporting the retired cloistered emperor. This permanent division fractured traditional aristocratic alliances, forcing both sides to actively recruit provincial samurai clans, especially the rising Terra and Minamoto, to serve as their physical security and armed forces. In the year 1156, these growing political tensions exploded into open military conflict during the Heian Rebellion, which directly followed a succession dispute. This dispute pitted the retired Emperor Sudoku against his own brother, the reigning Emperor Go-Shirakawa, with each side actively mobilizing their own provincial samurai supporters to fight for control in the capital city of Kyoto. Ultimately, the Heian Rebellion was settled not through traditional legal arbitration or court negotiations, but through violent street battles in Kyoto fought by rival samurai leaders. Terra no Kiyomori led the warrior forces supporting Go-Shirakawa, while Minamoto no Yoshitomo joined him, successfully defeating Sudoku's loyalists in just a few hours of fierce, bloody fighting in the streets. Following his complete defeat, the retired Emperor Sudoku was exiled to the remote Sanuki province on Shikoku Island. According to local legend, the angry Sudoku bit his tongue and wrote terrible curses in blood on Buddhist scrolls, swearing to become a great demon that would completely destroy the imperial court of Japan. The Heian Rebellion clearly demonstrated to all of Japan that military strength, rather than court lineage, was now the ultimate source of power. Just 3 years later, in the year 1159, the Heian Rebellion broke out as Minamoto no Yoshitomo launched a sudden surprise military coup in the capital city of Kyoto. Minamoto no Yoshitomo launched a sudden surprise attack on the palace of Go-Shirakawa, but Terra no Kiyomori quickly returned to Kyoto with his forces and crushed the Minamoto rebellion. Kiyomori executed Yoshitomo and exiled his young sons, including the future leader Minamoto no Yoritomo, successfully solidifying the Terra clan's complete military control over the Kyoto imperial court and the capital. In the year 1167, the warlord Terra no Kiyomori took the highest civil office of Dajo Daijin, which translates to Grand Minister of State, completely bypassing traditional aristocratic ranks. Kiyomori then successfully married his daughter Tokyuko to Emperor Takakura, adopting the exact same marriage politics previously used by the Fujiwara regents to dominate the imperial throne from within. By placing his young grandson, the child Emperor Antoku, on the imperial throne in the year 1180, Kiyomori deeply alienated the old Heian court nobility. This bold political move directly provoked Prince Machihito, a son of Go-Shirakawa, to issue a secret call to arms to all samurai to destroy the Terra clan, starting the historic Genpei War. The brutal Genpei War lasted for 5 years, bringing massive physical destruction to the provinces and the capital as samurai armies clashed across the country. Minamoto no Yoritomo, leading the Minamoto coalition from the Kanto region, organized a highly disciplined warrior force to systematically dismantle the Terra clan's extensive network and seize supreme national power. The destructive conflict ended in the year 1185 at the decisive naval battle of Dan no-yura, which was fought in the narrow Shimonoseki Strait. The Terra fleet was completely defeated there, and Kiyomori's widow leaped into the cold sea with the young child Emperor Antoku in her arms to prevent his capture by the victorious Minamoto warriors. As the young Emperor Antoku drowned, the sacred sword, which was one of the 3 precious imperial regalia of Japan, was lost forever in the ocean depths. This tragic and symbolic loss marked the absolute end of the supreme political authority of the Heian imperial court, as the sacred symbols of divine rule were scattered by war. In the year 1192, Minamoto no Yoritomo was officially appointed Sei Taishogun by the fragile imperial court in Kyoto. Yoritomo established his administrative government, known as the Bakufu, in the eastern city of Kamakura, intentionally locating it far away from the courtly intrigues and cultural distractions of the old capital of Heian-kyo. The new Kamakura shogunate stripped the Heian court of almost all its remaining political and military authority, effectively reducing the emperor to a ceremonial figurehead. The court nobles, who once controlled vast shun estates across the country, were left with only their prestige court rank titles and their empty daily palace rituals. While they lost their actual political power, the Heian nobles actively preserved their cultural heritage by compiling major poetic anthologies. For instance, Fujiwara no Teika compiled the famous Shin Kakken Wakashu in the year 1205, documenting a highly refined court aesthetic that was rapidly fading under the military rule of the samurai class. The grand Shindanzukuri mansions of Heian-kyo were gradually abandoned or destroyed, slowly replaced by the simpler, more defensive architectural styles of the rising samurai. The gravel courtyards and pleasure ponds of the old elite were replaced by sturdy wooden fences and weapon racks, reflecting the new and harsh militarized reality of medieval Japan. In the year 1221, the short-lived Jokyu War officially ended the last major court attempt to overthrow the military power of the Kamakura shogunate. Led by the highly ambitious retired Emperor Go-Toba, the court loyalist forces were easily defeated by the shogunate's massive army, permanently securing the dominance of the samurai warrior class in Japan for centuries. This crushing military defeat left the Kyoto aristocracy entirely dependent on the new shogunate for their basic survival and remaining land revenues. The old imperial court in Kyoto continued to hold their traditional ceremonies, but they had completely lost the physical and financial means to challenge any political decisions of the Kamakura generals. The physical landscape of Heian-kyo changed dramatically during this transition, as commercial markets and fortified warrior residences spread across the once symmetrical layout. The famous Suzaku Avenue was no longer a grand, clean imperial corridor, instead becoming a simple, dusty pathway lined with small wooden shops, basic craft stalls, and busy traveling commoner merchants selling daily wares. In order to maintain their remaining social standing and relevance, noble families turned their primary focus towards specialized knowledge of complex court protocol, traditional calligraphy, and classical poetry. They closely guarded these esoteric secrets, which later formed the basis of the Imoto systems, as valuable family properties that could be passed down to secure a stable financial income. The deep split between the Kyoto imperial court and the warrior shogunate established a unique system of dual authority that lasted in Japan for 7 centuries. While the military shogun held all the actual administrative and military power, they still strictly required the emperor's formal blessing and official appointment to successfully legitimize their rule over the country. This constant and crucial military reliance on imperial legitimacy kept the court alive, even during long, difficult periods of extreme poverty and local military violence. Succeeding shoguns periodically rebuilt the ruined palace halls and sponsored grand court festivals, ensuring that the ancient aesthetic traditions of the court remained preserved as important symbols of historical state unity. In the early 14th century, the determined Emperor Go-Daigo attempted to restore direct imperial rule to the throne through the Kenmu Restoration of 1333. However, this brief restoration collapsed completely within 3 years, leading directly to the rise and subsequent reign of the Ashikaga shogunate, further reducing the remaining political power of the Kyoto nobility. The court's political decline reached its absolute lowest point during the war-torn Sengoku period, when the capital of Kyoto was completely devastated by the Anin War of 1467. The grand Deidari Palace enclosure was burned to the ground, and many impoverished nobles fled the ruined capital to seek safety in remote rural provinces. During these desperate years of civil conflict, the imperial court was so impoverished that the formal accession ceremony of Emperor Go-Nara in 1536 had to be delayed for 10 years. The ceremony was only made possible when powerful local daimyo, such as Aocha Yashitaka, donated the necessary funds directly to the court treasury. The Kyoto court was eventually restored to material security and stability by the great military unifiers Oda Nobunaga and Toyotomi Hideyoshi in the late 16th century. These powerful leaders rebuilt the imperial palace in Kyoto and provided regular rice stipends to the court nobles, but they also kept the entire aristocracy under strict political surveillance. Under the new Tokugawa shogunate established in the year 1603, the Kyoto imperial court was strictly governed by the Kyudo Shohado, which was a restrictive set of legal regulations. These strict laws limited the daily activities of the emperor and the nobles entirely to aesthetic studies, classical poetry, and the careful maintenance of traditional court ceremonies. For over 250 years, the Kyoto court remained a secluded, quiet world of elaborate multi-layered silk robes and ancient palace rituals. They were completely separated from the actual center of political power in Edo, which rapidly grew into a massive military metropolis and became the single largest city in all of Japan. This political isolation ended in the year 1868 with the historic Meiji Restoration, when the last Tokugawa shogun returned his political authority directly to Emperor Meiji. The restoration abolished the shogunate, ending the rule of the samurai, and successfully brought the imperial line back to the absolute center of Japan's national sovereign government. As a major part of this modern national transformation, the imperial court finally left its ancient home in Kyoto and moved to the new capital city of Tokyo. The old Heian Palace site in Kyoto was permanently left behind, slowly transitioning from a bustling center of ancient political intrigue into a quiet, peaceful historic public park. The physical remnants of the Heian period can still be found today in modern Kyoto, such as the famous Byadoin Temple. Its celebrated Phoenix Hall, built on the scenic banks of the Uji River in the year 1053, still beautifully displays the elegant wooden architecture that once symbolized the Pure Land paradise for the court elite. Another famous surviving structure from this elegant historical era is the Daigoji Temple, which features a tall five-tiered pagoda completed in the year 951. This iconic wooden pagoda stands today as the single oldest surviving wooden building in Kyoto, successfully surviving the multiple fires and civil wars that repeatedly consumed the capital over the centuries. The literature composed by Heian court women, such as Murasaki Shikibu's Tale of Genji, remains the most complete cultural record of this elegant era. These handwritten scrolls carefully preserved the names, deep emotions, and private scandals of the elite, keeping their memory alive long after their grand wooden estate palaces crumbled away into dust. Today, the ancient traditions of this courtly Heian world are beautifully reenacted every year during Kyoto's historic Ai Matsuri festival. Under the bright morning sun, participants dressed in colorful, heavy 12-layered silk robes walk quietly through the modern city streets, faithfully repeating a grand and historic imperial procession that was first performed over 12 centuries ago.